All right, and she will answer questions and comments, etc. So please come to that event too. And this event, we titled it "The Last Word: Defendants' Final Statements" as the opportunity for free speech in Russia. And of course, Anna will tell you all about why this title and what is this talk about. And let me say a few words about Anna in case you don't know. Anna is a Russian journalist, curator, documentary filmmaker, and playwright. She has worked at Russia's most influential media since the late 90s, notably as a special correspondent for Kommersant newspaper covering cultural and social issues, and as literary critic and editor. After Russia annexed Crimea, censorship intensified, and the media linked to the state and big money could no longer afford freedom of expression. And at that moment, Narinskaya moved to full independent media. Her best known, and she started writing for Novaya Gazeta and participating in Dozh TV broadcasts. At the same moment, she started curating exhibitions, and among her best known projects are such exhibitions as 200 Hits a Minute, Typewriter and Consciousness of the 20th Century, Last Address, commemorating repressions in today's Russia, Find a Jew. There was an exhibition, and now it's a documentary, Soviet Jews as a Social and Cultural Phenomenon, Museum of Joseph Brodsky. Anna participated in designing of Brodsky's museum in this famous 1.5 room apartment in Petersburg. And in summer of 22, after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, Anna left Russia, and she now lives in Berlin. And in December 22, her play, The Last Word, exactly the one she's going to talk about, based on documents of last years, was premiered on the stage of the Gorky Theater in Berlin. And I think that sort of smoothly connects what I said with your talk.
Okay, first of all, hi. Yes, that's me, and what Mark told about me is partially a truth. I mean, it's partially truth because it's just a part of what happened to me. Anyway, I, as you can notice, I am not a native English speaker. So I don't know whether this word, the final statement of the defendant as a last opportunity, for my ear, I think that opportunity is kind of too jolly for this title, and it's not an opportunity, just last chance of free speech. And we are gathered today here, in a incredibly sad day. I mean, all these days for the last war and something are incredibly sad, but today is absolutely heartbreaking, because today the Vladimir Karamurza, who is the human rights advocate and politician, and I knew him, I know him, and I met him lots of times, an incredibly honest person, an incredibly brave person. He was given a sentence of 25 years of concentration camp, of Russian camp, of the, how to say, строгого режима, which has been kind of most severe, yeah. And okay, we were witnessing the last month, how the repressions in Russia, they're getting like more harsher and harsher, but this case is really a declaration of the return of the Gulag, because it's absolutely the Stalinist time sentence, and also because that's very important. Maybe for you, you see it's like a little detail, but it's not a detail because how? Because I was really, maybe somebody of you know, I was really following the how political cases are being held in Russia. So, and it almost always goes like this. The prosecutor asks for some time, and then the defender asks less time or no time at all, and then it's not like they decide somewhere in between, but they kind of take some years or some time off in the sentence. So it's almost maybe the first time, and definitely the first time when it's such a important case, when kind of they didn't listen to defenders at all. It's like they asked for this enormous time, and they given him this enormous time. So I think that's a really, I mean, of course, we've been reading science all this time, but it's not a sign. It's like a declaration, and that they're saying, everybody who is against us, everybody who is brave enough to raise voice against us, gonna have this. I have no doubts that that's very symbolic. And of course, there's a personal revenge as well in this particular case, because maybe lots of that Karamurza was the ones who initiated the Magnitsky case and the sanctions. Of course, there is this thing in this, but apart from that, of course, it's declaration for and kind of for everyone, but just to people to stop, not only just to raise voices. And coming from that to the theme of our meeting, I would say that several days ago, I mean a week ago, 10th of April, Vladimir Karamurza said he had this final statement in the court in Moscow, and it was already translated into English, and it was very quoted everywhere. And actually, he said in this last statement, final statement, that what's happening to him is the drive of being not silent. So, and so he understands, and he understood what's going on with him, kind of as I explained earlier. But I do recommend everyone to read what he said, and it's incredibly impressive. But the part of this speech which are mostly quoted are the parts that where he speaks about the return of the big terror years, and because actually the rhetoric of the enemies of the people is absolutely back. It's been like now in kind of public discourse, in its the enemies of the people, they discussed on television, and there's big propaganda TV shows like Vladimir Solovyov, and if I think you know who he is, that's the major Kremlin propagandist. But also he's saying, and I believe this part, the end of his speech, was not only quoted but in a way criticized, because he says that there is hope, and he believes in the changes in the country. And he said that he believes that society will open its eyes and be horrified at the terrible crimes that have been committed in its name, or in the name of the society. And when it happens, and he believes that it's going to happen, Russia going to change. And my presentation, my speech is not going to be very long, and we can discuss something later. So, there is, so maybe we discuss this topic as well, but there is now a tendency to kind of think that any hope for Russia is like, you should not even kind of saying that it exists is wrong thing to do. But that's not what Karamurza believes in. So, but what I want to move to now is this part of his speech where he said that about actually the phenomena of the last word in the in court of the final statement. And he says the last words usually ask for an acquittal. For a person who has not committed a crime, the only legitimate sentence would be acquittal. But I ask nothing of this court. I know my sentence. And in this, knowing this and understanding this, we can ask ourselves, why have this final, why bother? Because actually, that's true. Nothing depends on your last word or final statement. And actually, nothing depends even on the speech of your defender. Actually, nothing depends on anything. It's all these sentences been already decided in Kremlin, and they just given to the judge on the phone. And it's exactly what's happening. But why people bother, and they do, and I talked to lots of people who went through political cases, from the girls from Pussy Riot to the girls from Doxy magazine, Alla Gutnikova and Natasha Tishkevich, and all of them, they were really working on their final statements, where they were writing and looking up stuff, and it was really like a job for them. So why bother in these circumstances to have this speech? And the answer to this question is quite a paradox, because actually this cage, because as you know, in Russia, the people in court, they sit in cages. It's not always the cage, how the metal things, how do you call it? The whatever, you understand me? Yes, but it's mainly the glass cage, which is in a way even worse because it's very stuffy in there. You actually, the defendant, the person who's sitting in there, it cannot really be heard in the courtroom. It's not better in this glass cage. If we discuss what's better in these circumstances, but so people sit in cages. So, and this cage is basically the last place in Russia where the speech is free, because actually in your last statement, in your final statement, you can say whatever you want, and people use this opportunity. And also, of course, it's not specifically new for even not Soviet, for Russia, Soviet Union, and the Tsarist Russia, because actually, even before the revolution, as far as I think you know, the what's been said in courts was discussed in the society, but if we do a little bit of like doing it by the book with the history, but the history of this kind of phenomenon of the last word is not very straightforward, because it differs from because of political circumstances and traditions. So before the revolution, the defendants, they kind of, most of all, they didn't want to say this last speech, and they were giving this opportunity to the defenders. So the speeches of the defenders before the revolution were incredibly famous texts. The defenders of the nihilists, of young revolutionists, and the defenders were very important people, like philosophers in a way, and it was reflected in literature, as again, as you know, and there's a maybe not really favorably, because the most important person who is reflected in literature is the defender called Spitikovich in Karamazov Brothers, and Dostoevsky, who is a little bit making fun of him, and he is not happy with this defenders to be so influential, but he dedicates 4 chapters of the novel to his speech. So he writes the speech for him, because of course it's an imaginable speech. Of course, there are prototypes of this particular defender, and I believe there are 2 of them, but one called Stasevich. No, they're not funny. But anyway, and he, but that's just to illustrate how influential those guys were. Like, you know, if to criticize the liberal take on liberty, Dostoevsky dedicates 4 chapters of the novel to to this defender. And of course, for the break for the big Thera time, where like nothing was, apart from maybe people saying, yes, I was the enemy of the people, or I was the spy, you know, which was pressed out of people and tortured out of them. With the break for this period of time, the final statement of the defendant became a thing, sort of, in the 60s and the 70s, and that's really in like what's going on today. I mean, it's kind of the predecessor of the phenomena we have now. And of course, you know, the final statement of Joseph Brodsky, which was recorded by Frida Vigdorova, and that's a very, and it was it was a samizdat. It was typed on a typewriter, and people were giving to each other copies of this. And you know, like the most famous quote, "I'm no parasite, I'm a poet, I will bring honor and glory to this country." So Brodsky, again, his aim in this speech was not to defend himself, but from the charges, but to declare his, like, to make a manifesto. And kind of in the same way or similar way, this opportunity was used by Andrei Sinyavsky, Yuri Daniel, and Vladimir Bukovsky, and Amalrik, and Shiransky. And if you look up, you can find the final statements, and they were, again, by mostly defendants, not necessarily recorded, because recording was not allowed or in a courtroom, by written by hand. So what we know, it's like a sort of a literature based on, because Vigdorova, she knew shorthand. So therefore, how she written down the Brodsky speech is quite really close to what he really said, but the other stuff is it's really kind of a literature based on what he said. But so what's different between what I told you about, even when people were using the lust, because as you know, in Soviet Union in 60s, 70s, censorship was really harsh. So again, this place was used as the opportunity of free speech. But why is it different from now? And why I can only call this what was going on there, then kind of a prologue to what's going on now. Because actually, strangely enough, I think that a very important part of the importance of the phenomenon of final statement of the defendant is the technical progress, because now what you can do, and even when people are not allowed in the courtroom, like the defender carries a telephone in a pocket and he switches, or she switches it on. I can tell you that I know, because I've been doing it myself. I'm not a defender, but I later told you about the criminal case. I was following myself and I was doing the same stuff. I was hiding telephone in my pocket and switching the recording on. So these final words, now they can be recorded. And then after they're recording and typed, they are placed on social media. So very soon, actually, the very evening of the day, this final statement is said, sounds in court. It's already on social media, on different sites and everywhere. So it's very quick reaction, which never happened before. It's really soon. And this, because of the incredible wave of the repressions, we can say that we have more of these last statements than we used to have ever. It's a really kind of important genre. It's what I actually think it's in media. The final word of the defendant in nowadays Russian, it's in media on their own. If you go to the very important site called Media Zona, which is like a specific site about the about human rights, or actually the absence of human rights in Russia, then you can see that the last statement of defendant from some case somewhere will appear almost every day, because they put all these last words on as a content, because we can do nothing with the elitism of our mind. So what we know about are famous cases. We know cases from Moscow. We know cases of the people who've been famous before. So we watch them. We don't know about people who are who've been, doing kind of protecting human rights somewhere on the Urals or in the Siberia, and before they were taken to prison, we didn't know about them. So even now, I should look up the name of the woman, because even I don't remember it. But for example, this Lilia Chilisheva, and she's in Ufa, and she was the head of the local Navalny organization, and now she's facing 18 years. 18 years, and the case is now on, and they promised to have a sentence before the end of April. So this woman, and when she gonna have her final statement, we see it on lots of sites, again on social media. That's an example. So, and that's the free speech, which is very passionate, and because there are lots and lots of circumstances, like people actually have nothing to do in prison or even under house arrest. So writing this thing is like a thing to do. You have time to do that. So it's very often these things, they are very interesting. On the other hand, these people who are writing, especially if they're writing these last statements from prison, it's not a prison, how do you call Susan? When they're part of the prison, when you see it before you send, essentially, yes, this thing. Anyway, you sit there, and actually the detention centers, they're very closed. So the only source about what's going on there are those final statements. And I want to tell you, and that actually final statement we used in our performance, that the final statement of the Ingush human rights defender Zarifa Sultieva, and she is in prison now in Ingushetia, and she was sentenced for 7.5 years 2 years ago, and she describes what happens to women in detention centers and specifically to women who are pregnant or just gave birth to kids. And you cannot imagine, I mean, of course you can imagine, but you cannot imagine the circumstances. For example, she describes how she was put in a cell with a woman. She just had a little boy, and she, with her own eyes, she saw cockroaches on the baby. So unsanitary was the cell, and they were calling for the prison commissioner every day. They were demanding him to come, and he never came. And so it's like we don't know about that. And strangely, I mean, not strangely, but because of these horrible circumstances, I would say these final statements, they are the only source of knowledge about what's going on there. So therefore, I think I'm right saying that these texts, they are media on their own. And I don't know, we can talk about, I mean, you know, of course, that even one person, he or she, they're not saying just one final word, because there are lots of hearings. So, for example, once they hear for whether you should go to prison or be under the house arrest, and then you have a final statement, and then before you get your sentence, you also have a final statement. So one person mainly has the opportunity to say several final statements. So it's not just one. So there are really a lot of them. So, and they are not only literature, and that's the next thing I'm going to talk about, but they are, as I said, media. And I also want, if I didn't bore you yet, to talk a little bit about my own experience with this final statement as the source of information. And you know, people who know me here, they know that some years ago I got involved in the criminal case, which was called the case of Novaya Velichia, the new greatness, and that was the case where several teenagers, they had this Telegram chat, and the chat was infiltrated by the guy from Facebook, like Facebook, and the guy was provoking them to say, actually, even he provoked them just to write down, for example, that it would be nice if the regime changed, not more. It was about this. And for that, they were called the extremist group, and now there were 5 of them, and two of them are still in prison, and the others were under house arrest after some after some work of human rights activists done with help of also me and my friends. But anyway, I was going to the hearing of these kids, because I was writing on that in the newspapers and in social media, and I was decided to help them somehow, because that case incredibly touched me. And there were these kids, there were kids from very I would say, simple families. They were not even from Moscow, but from outskirts of Moscow. Mostly they were kids with families from the single mothers. And the guy who got the worst sentence, he was an orphan, and he was like bad boy in the neighborhood. He was like fighting people, and he had bad reputation, and he was like 23. So it's with this age we're talking about. And the others, they were younger, and they were underage girls, 2 underage girls who were taken to court when they were under 18. But anyway, this guy, Ruslan, he had his last word, the final statement. And I was thinking what he's going to say, because he is like uneducated. And I was really worried about him. And what he has done, he spent this half an hour he was given for this speech on describing the tortures, how he was tortured when the police entered his house. It was kind of trying to press him to confess that he was, an extremist. And he was in a very precise detail describing these tortures. And actually, because it was some time ago, it was in 2018, I actually didn't know. It was the first time I understood that people are not in prison, but actually in their own apartment. But that when the police comes to kind of show them a warrant, they're really torturing people. And so again, I'm saying he used very wisely this guy. I thought, oh, he's uneducated, what he's going to say. He used it incredibly wisely to explain what's going on. Of course, it didn't help. Of course, we published it everywhere, and people were really angry, those people who are angry about that. But he used this incredibly wise way. But not only it was I would say, politically wise thing to do, it was because what I think actually, that any one of us, once in a life, at least once, can write something really strong. I really, really wish no one anywhere, and specifically no one in this room, ever would find herself or himself in the circumstances when you are able to write this strong thing. But of course, when you are under such a pressure, in this incredibly horrible circumstances, when you are alone and this enormous force of the enforcement and of this hostile country oppressing you, it does something to your kind of way you're expressing yourself. Because if you read these final statements, and I hope they're going to be published, and I hope they're going to be booked, but that you see it's very strong. I don't want to say word literature, but they're very strong texts. It's not mumbling. They are really, these people, being even those who are not Karamurza, who are not educated, who are not don't know rhetorics, but they're very strong, and they kind of, because yes, circumstances, life, and provokes it to be strong. And actually, if you ask me, I don't know what's better, because and now I'm kind of coming to the last part of what I'm going to say. When comparing what are very sophisticated people are saying, and quoting Descartes and as our Butnikova, and quoting famous feminists and human rights activists, or this I don't know, I know it's maybe not politically correct to call somebody simple, but I don't know, ordinary, even worse, I believe. But anyway, yeah, but kind of I can always claim that my English is not good enough. But but somebody who didn't go to school, I mean, to university, but what these people do mainly, they're not giving you any kind of philosophical thoughts, but they're just describing what happened to them. And that's incredibly, let me repeat myself, strong text. So I've been thinking about it a lot. At some point in March, not this March, March 2022, I was, believe, still in Moscow, and me and my friend, who is an actress, Alisa Khazanova, we were discussing how everybody became numb, that there is absolutely, in Russia, I mean, that it's absolutely no way you can say anything, like with the war and this horrible, I mean, the bombings, and how you became all of a sudden the part of the aggressor and whatever, you understand. Anyway, and we were discussing that she, for example, as an actress, her aim is, to kind of recreate some texts on stage, but there are no texts which she wants to be recreated or we feel can be recreated at the moment. And then we thought that maybe there are some texts, and these texts are the final statements of the political prisoners of the time. And then if we're talking, because I believe that's at that point, that even now, talking about what's going on within Russia, and actually it reflects what's going on, I wouldn't say in Ukraine, but what's going on, what is done by Russia in Ukraine. But I think that these texts, they're the most relevant thing at the moment. They're not kind of politically kind of describing the situation, but on an emotional level, I think that these are the most relevant texts or words. Anyway, so we decided to do some performance based on them, and I don't want to talk more, because then there were no space for discussion, but I just want to say that because of different reasons, I decided that we will go only with the last statement of women, women political prisoners. So there is now a performance which is in the repertoire of the Gorky Theater in Berlin, and it's one woman performance, and she is like she plays the role also of all these women being kind of put in some like video mapping set. But I just wanted to add, and maybe to explain why they are only women, because it's not only, actually it's not because we only have an actress, and so it's easier for her to personificate. Yeah, yes. Women, but also because there are a very specific thing going on with women in Russia, because they are not only oppressed by the regime if they are politically active, but actually they are actually oppressed by the society by itself, because Russia is incredibly conservative and misogynic, and so even women who has nothing to do with politics, they are present in their families very often. And if something horrible happens, then the state is always on the side of the man. And that's the theme of another big discussion, because it's like, that the domestic violence is not considered to be criminal in Russia. You can beat up your wife as long as you want, and it's not a criminal thing. And if something happens, but what's also interesting that all those cases against women, they are the society. That's only this, not only the state, but society also on the side of the man always. And I was following some of the cases, for example, when the woman who was she and her kid, they were tortured by men, and she was beaten up like years, and then all of a sudden there is a row, and she kills the guy, and then all the society, and all her neighbors, everyone who was witnessing how she was beaten up for all these years would say that's her fault, and she should have gone to the neighbors and sits there and wait until he is through with his rage. And that's, I'm quoting now. So so these cases which we took in our performance, they are not only political. I mean, they are political, but for example, we've taken the Yulia Tsvetkova case and her final statement, and you know that she was, of course, it is in a way political case, but she was the case against her was about pornography, because she was putting her drawings of vagina online, and that was considered to be pornography. And anyway, rounding everything up, and maybe before, I don't know, we show small clips, because the performance is not recorded, and yeah, I have only 2 tiny clips to show you. The performance is in English. I think that I'm sure that in the circumstances of in horrible oppression of free speech, and in the place where this oppression is like climaxing, so the courtroom where these people giving those incredible sentences, this courtroom became in Russia nowadays the last place where you can speak freely, and people do. Okay, that's the end, and let's show if we can. But it's that's Alisa Khazanova. That's the tiny recording of the rehearsal. Sorry, let me say something. I just want for you not to be that started, because that's a proper performance. So what you will see, it's a monologue, and also it's a song, which is because we're taking some poems as well. For example, Natalia Gorbanevskaya poems, Natalia Gorbanevskaya, who was okay, anyway, and so there are songs in the performance, and you're going to see one of them as well. Okay. That's. That's my device for это было сначала войны прошел медии, никто не знал, что с собой делать. И вот тогда... Sorry, you want to watch this thing and does everything? Yeah. So let's
Из таких вот последних слов, тех замечательных людей, которые... Честно, это было, наверное, одно из самых... Момент для меня лично потеряла смысл абсолютно.
Положение людей при Путине.
The director.
Раскула.
Another, there are 2 plus 2. Each person do not be
Ценности женщины в России еще более уязвимы.
not be afraid to say that the emperor has no clothes. Do not be afraid to scream, to burst into tears. Keep repeating to yourself and others that 2 plus 2 equals 4, that black is black and white is white. I am a human being, strong and brave. I am a strong and brave woman.
В спектакле фрагменты их речей с одной стороны составляют полифонические. Это было отменить всеобщую немоту.
The second criminal case in my life. Nearly 10 years have passed since that. Criminal charges for political activism no longer shocking and have become just the morning news.
Sorry, I thought that's it, but because the tiny thing was from Alla Putnikova and the last one is from Maria Alekina, second criminal case. That's basically up to video all we have. Now we can talk about it.
Thank you so much. And you have questions or comments? Yes. Yeah. Stop it.
This was an incredible presentation and so painful just to hear about all that. I'm wondering why these last statements are allowed, and is there a danger that they will be stopped by the regime?
Yes, I think that very soon all the court hearings going to be closed and there will be no last statement. So I think that we kind of lived through very exceptional period so therefore I'm sure that there should be a book. And because it's not going to last longer. And even now, if Karamurza, he had this last word on the 10th of April, but today, because the hearing, the sentence was a closed hearing. Nobody was let in. So, yeah, I don't know if you read, by the law, according to law, they should, even when there's a case of treason, because, he's charged with treason. And, but according to the law, even in such case, the public should be let in to hear the sentence, but people weren't let in. So I'm sure that very soon, we will not have these final statements. And as to how it used to be, then maybe, I don't know whether any of you was really following that, but for some time, for a long time, the Putin administration was really staging or pretending that they do it by the book, that we have a real court hearing. They were letting journalists in. When I was going to this Novaya Velichia, to the case, there were not only me, there were even cameras. It doesn't influence anything, didn't influence anything, but it was like, okay, it's a normal court. And we had all the procedures, and like the defendants were having long speeches and everything, and evidence and everything. It wasn't like Troika, Troika. But yeah, I think that very soon we will not have that.
I have two questions, and then I'll give the floor. to the audience, of course. One, could you please tell us which cases, which final statements you used in your performance? Just name those who we had.
Yeah.
And another thing, so the mobile version of this performance was shown Saturday at Princeton University, and in Q&A session there, Anna mentioned that when they were showing, when there was a premiere and also Q&A of this production in Berlin, and the reaction was, we can't believe that these things are happening.
Yeah.
Right. And I think I would like you to comment on this and on the sort of political significance of this production, how you understand.
Okay, first of all, I want to say that we used it all started with the last final statement of Alla Gutnikova, a beautiful speech, but that's the stream of somebody being incredibly well-read and intelligent and quoting Descartes and I don't know who else, medieval mystics, which she did in her speech, and talking about, yeah, it's a beautiful piece. Of course, you know, these final statements are edited by me because they're very long and you cannot do it. But I actually think that this kind of whole thing started with Pussy Riot case, the first Pussy Riot case in 2012, because they gave specifically two of them, Tolokonikova and Alyokhina, and we used both of them in these speeches which were discussed in the public, where they were like taken already as something very important, like some statements. So, and after that, people in this kind of, those people who are looking into these things were kind of starting to publish these last words and this final statement. So we taken in our performance Nadezhda Tolokonikova, Maria Alyokhina, Alla Gutnikova, Zarifa Sultieva, I told you about, Yulia Galyamina, because but she was very important because she's like acting politician, and she's the woman who kind of really still tries to change something, to do something. And Anastasia Shevchenko. And for us, it was very important that we use a speech of Sasha Skochelenko, but she had two speeches, and one is kind of political, and the other one, the first one, which we used actually, that's the one where she in very tiny details describing her health. And that's absolutely heartbreaking speech, because she is just, again, it's like describing torture, because she is in this descendant center, she got the absolute intolerance to gluten. And she's like on purpose been fed gluten. And she is describing how like her body really is shutting up. And for example, her blood pressure is like, she says numbers, I've forgotten, but really low. So she always wants to lie down, but she is not allowed to lie down, because in the detention center, you only can lie down since 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. And all of the other hours of the day, you should stand up. And as reaction on this particular speech, people, because on the first performance, which was in December, of course, everybody in the theater was Russian or Russian speaking. And everybody was not happy that the performance was in English, and it was kind of one reaction, but people were impressed mostly. But then when Gorky Theater, because okay, it's another story, but we were really lucky. I mean, if you can call this in this case anything lucky, we were put in the repertoire, and we play we have two performances every month in the Gorky Theater, and German people or maybe anyway, not Russian speakers began coming, and that was another reaction. And we were so we now know for sure that it was the right decision to do it in English and with German subtitles, because people didn't know about that, and people incredibly alerted. And as I told you, people not once, twice or three times, people were coming up to me and specifically about this monologue by Sasha Skochelenko telling me, but this you made up. This cannot be happening. And of course, I mean, I've been asked, why are people so naive? They don't know about what's going on in Russia. I don't know. I mean, yes, people are so naive. Or they still think that Russia is part of Europe. Or, as I've been told, I don't know, I don't want to repeat the questions I had in Princeton, but still, yes, there is a reaction. And there were, after our performance, articles in German newspapers, which were actually mainly centered on the information, not on the art side, which was, because still it's, as maybe from these tiny things you've seen, it's arty, but and maybe to the slight disappointment of our director, but this, it was very good for, I mean, pressing people to talk again or about what's going on to political prisoners in Russia, because of course now it is slightly forbidden. Or not slightly. Yes, yeah.
You made a comment that seemed almost allegorical about this woman who suffered years of abuse under her husband and finally kills him, and then her neighbors, having witnessed this, thought she should have just sat there and waited. It seems like the whole country is expected to sit there and wait this out, not unique to Russia, but obviously happening in Russia now in an intense form.
Absolutely. You're absolutely, I only can say yes, but I think that violence nowadays is absolutely normalized in Russia. Violence in every kind of in every form of it, it's taken for granted. It's taken like something what's happening for us, and specifically with women. Why it's important? Because while violence which which affects the weaker side. So if you're weak, it's your guilt. Yeah, it's your fault. Sorry, it's your fault. So that's obvious that women is beaten up because she doesn't know her place. Because if she is weak, then she should know her place. And that's sadly what society agrees on, even more than on loving Putin. Because I can assure you, it's not like everybody in Russia likes Putin, or I think actually majority of people in Russia doesn't like him personally. But this system is like system of violence and oppression of the weak ones is like taken by society like the only possible one.
But if I may ask, I think that there is a flip side of this phenomenon, and your production actually highlights it. There is a resistance, and those who are weak one, surprisingly, are in the avant-garde of this resistance. Not even in quantities, there are many more women activists who are of course persecuted and imprisoned, and etc., than male ones.
And they are sorry for interrupting, and they feared, because do you know that like about 2 weeks ago, feminism was declared an extremist philosophy in Russia. So even and that's the law. That's if you say I'm a feminist, then you kind of declare yourself being an extremist, which is illegal, and then you go to jail. So you're right, Marcus. Marcus right. It really the system kind of provokes resistance, and people who are against it, they're feared even now. But still, and I mean, talking about women, that's a big topic and heartbreaking topic, because even those people who are like anti-regime, they would still be very hierarchical and conservative, family-wise, and all kind of, you can, because you easily can dislike Putin, but think that your wife should listen to you and kind of be your servant. That's not right. You cannot be so. And I think that this hierarchical and violent system of Russian society at the moment is kind of broader than the Putin support.
Since as you said you had German audience coming to the theater, and that was an important opening, do you find women's voices from outside Russia being aware of what's going on specifically to women and their position there, which is even pre-Soviet condition, that are providing any solidarity or anything like that?
It's again, unfortunately, it's just long conversation, because nowadays, me personally, and I'm not a political prisoner, and even I'm not a really women or human rights activist. I'm just a person who helps someone, or maybe before I was an activist, but no more. And I get solidarity because I live abroad. In Germany, you get a lot, everything. But when you in Russia and not in Moscow, when you live in Yekaterinburg or Nizhny Tagil, no solidarity will kind of get to you through all these walls and all these distances. Maybe people somewhere in Germany very kind of compassionate, but you will not know it. You know that we have the lots and lots of sites, and specifically social media, banned in Russia. So you should have this specific things to go around it, like VPN, but some of VPN are being shut down now because they are now doing the digital terror as well. So, I mean, what is solidarity? And you cannot, and don't get me started on sanctions and everything. Yeah, but because of all the financial correspondence with Russia is blocked by the West, so you cannot help really even the NGOs in Russia, or you cannot really help people in Russia from abroad. So this solidarity, okay, we are very happy. Yes, we had this performance in English with German subtitles. We're now maybe going to bring this performance to America. And I very much would like to alert people, and specifically women, about what's going on. But you only can help now. The situation is that we only can help specific people. If you decide we would work on this particular case and maybe help and send money to the family and hire the defender and a lawyer, this can be done still. But anything broader is blocked from actually both sides, not only from within Russia, but from the outside as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Just again.
Thank you very much for this insightful presentation. I have a question about the role of embodiment in your theater performance.
Mhm.
You mentioned Sasha Sklichenko's
Yeah.
speech, and I also know that you have elements of dance.
Yeah.
Of course, when we think about a possibility of a feminist or queer feminist language, we think about the bodies are potential to offer something there. How important is the body in the theater piece that you created? And my second question is a bit technical, but I was wondering, because you mentioned that you edited the statements, I was wondering what your strategy was when you were editing that. Is it verbatim theater? How do you approach that? Is it a document? Is it a piece of literature?
It's okay.
Okay.
As to dance, I should tell you something. That the director of the plays, Maxim Didenko, who is very famous director, Russian director, and who also lives in Berlin, and what he was doing before was mainly body theater. He's mainly done dancing, actually. So entire preparing of the performance was a fight between me and him, because he really wanted this thing to be incredibly impressive, beautiful, with lots of movement. And I thought that we cannot express ourselves on the behalf or of the price of those women. That's their story, not my story as a director or so. But I mean, I cannot, we are not, it's not, okay, anyway. But he, first, as a director, is not very nice to him, because I wanted it to be real theater, not to be what in Germany would consider to be political theater, which is like in Russia we have theater dog, and that's the German idea of political theater: 4 people sitting on the stools and reciting. And in public in Germany is incredibly well behaved, so they go and sit hours listening to that. So yeah. But I really wanted it to be different from that, and also because there's so many people who they fled Russia, and they're, for example, you've seen little part of the video, and the video mapping is done by Ahe Theater from St. Petersburg. They now live in Finland, and they're incredible video artists, just beautiful. And all these people are sitting somewhere in the West, having absolutely nothing to do, no jobs. And so all these people are free for help. So I wanted them to do something, just so it was not only for them to participate. But I also wanted it not to be too impressive or too incredibly beautiful for people to forget what it is about and just watch the beauty of it. So it was very difficult to have balance, so that so coming back to your question, there's some dancing, but not lots of dancing. It's actually more, actually the only real dancing is with the telephonic speech, because Alice is just doing Pussy Riot and punk rock and everything, but basically it's not a lot of dance. And about editing, okay, I wanted them to be very different, because, and I think I managed. Yeah, because I wanted to show really different characters. And as I told you, some of them, like Butnikov, is incredibly intellectual, and some of them are down to earth, and some of them are older, and some of them are young, very young. So, and I wanted to underline these differences to show, among other things, that these repressions, they touch everything.
Yeah, so you talked about how technology has made it easier to record and to disseminate these statements, and at the same time, so much social media is blocked, more difficult to use VPN. So what is your sense of who's actually reading this within Russia, and how important is that? I mean, who do you want to be exposed to these statements? Is it more important to get it out to the world or within Russia?
It's again a topic for another conversation. I don't know whether you're just interested in the situation or you're following it, so maybe you heard about the incredible gap which now exists between those who emigrated and those who are left in Russia. And I'm now working on a piece about that, an article, a text, but it really, actually, that really, unlike, I think that what's going on in Russia is nothing, that's no references really to what's going on now. We cannot say it's like in the 70s or it's like in the 30s. It's completely different, nothing like anything actually. But as to this gap and the relationship between these two groups of anti-Putin people, because there are anti-Putin people who are still in Russia, it very much reminds me of what was going in Germany in the end of the, just in the end of the war and just after the war. And I'm reading, for example, the letters of Thomas Mann from California to Germany. And like, I feel offended. I think he's absolutely wrong, and what he's writing is cruel, and so he's incredibly cruel to people who survived through all these years of Nazism and the entire thing of collective guilt, and like everybody who just was there for sure participated. And so he thinks, for example, that Karl Jaspers, you know, the philosopher who stayed, and his wife was Jewish, and he was staying all the Nazi years in Germany. But for Thomas Mann, for example, he is the kind of the guy who kind of has something to do with the regime. And he, Thomas Mann, of course, not, because he went out years ago. Anyway, so, so I think that people within Russia who got these technical tools to go through all this blockage, and they can read this, that's very important for them, and even more important than for us, because we now live in this, being outside of Russia, and in this we have this kind of picture of black hole where something absolutely horrible is happening, and it's but here we have lots of information and everything, and people there, they live on also in this balance, because for lots of them they're still everyday life. They have kids at school, they should go to work, they even go to the parties because they cannot just die because they're in Russia. And on the other hand, that's happening every day, and they have this last statement out almost every day. So I cannot, you can imagine this kind of disbalance. Yeah.
But basically the difficulty of accessing the information is not too great. Information is accessible
If you want.
if you want. It's really easy to get.
Yeah, but not, I mean, I would say, like, I have my mother's in Moscow, and she lives in Moscow, and she's 86.
So
And
that's
for her,
right.
yeah, for her, I mean, because we installed, somebody we know installed for her this VPN thing, and then this VPN was blocked by Russian government, and then she can not, because she was logging in my Facebook under my name and reading all what people are. And she was like really interested in what was going on, and we were discussing it on the phone every time. And I just hope somebody whom I know, or maybe my kids know, not a lot of them left in Moscow up to now, but some friends of my kids maybe come and do something with her iPad. But so, yeah, there are difficulties, but basically, up to the point, everybody, if you want
an active user of
and also,
internet can do.
yeah, but also, okay, sorry.
Yes, that was another question.
I want to go back to the first question.
Uh-huh.
Is it possible that these statements are released sort of on purpose? Because all these are very resonant cases, and they are, each and every one of them, a judicial abomination. And with the exposure of the total lack of coherence from the point of view of the law, and these last speeches, they sort of underscore it. They are illustrating the manipulative nature of the law, and thus, until the regime becomes totalitarian for real, compared to what it is right now, the abundance of information about these cases, that they are so ridiculous and so preposterous. And that it's a signal that it's sending that the control of the punitive system is so complete that the arguments you're going to make, they're not going to matter, and they do not matter at all. So what comes through the speeches, it was something that just struck me very much with the Safronov case. That Safronov case is not a case, it's bullshit. Like, compared to even all the others, you can sort of understand where at least the conflict was hiding in. And the Safronov case was so artificial that the whole, to me, it appeared that the whole idea behind the Safronov case was just the existence of the case. That
Okay, can I?
see what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely see what you're saying. I know this approach. I disagree. First of all, I think that the regime is totalitarian at the moment already. It's not. I mean, it's really changed. When I was leaving Russia, I would say, as you said, that I mean it's horrible at autocratic, but it's not, because in our mind, it's totalitarianism is like Gulag, and there should be camps all over the country for the regime to be totalitarian. I don't think like that now. I think it's totalitarian enough, and I don't think they're gonna introduce Gulag. They're gonna go another way.
Right?
Yeah, I mean Gulag by like millions of people in camps, building something or whatever, digging holes.
No,
yeah.
you're wrong. I'm not trying to come up with.
Yeah, I understand that. But I just was mentioning. And you know, I think that the idea that you can be punished just like in Kafka sense, it already lives in Russia. You don't need this final statement just to prove it. Safronov case, you know, I worked with Safronov, so I really was following it, and it's a little bit more complicated. Yes, I do agree about from the legal side. You're absolutely right, but he is in a way a controversial figure because you know he was like reporting with Roscosmos, in a way supporting the horrible military ideas of the state, whatever. So I think there are lots of revenge in this in the Safronov's case as well. But putting it in short, I think that leaking, but it wasn't leaking. It was quite, okay, people were, you never can prove you recorded this or you just, shorthanded it. So, but there you, up to today, you had right to sit in the courtroom in shorthand if you can. So it wasn't a leak, but maybe you're right in a way that, yes, the government or whatever authority, they never were fighting the the fact that the speeches were published. Maybe because of just to say that there is no way you can escape if you want and there is don't bother to hire a lawyer anyway. And actually, I also think that the lawyers, why I'm very much favorable of lawyers, and I think they're heroes like Maria Esmond, the lawyer who was the defender on Karamurza case, but they need not for legal things. They need because they're the only persons who have access to the detained person. So they have got at least the guy or person because there are no visitors strategy in lots of detention centers. Anyway, so I don't think that's such complicated as you kind of suggested. Yeah.
All right. Okay. So I'm sorry to interrupt this conversation, but it's time to interrupt it. And Anna, thank you so very much for talking about that. Thank you. And I just want to repeat that you will have a pleasure to see Anna on Wednesday at 6:30 p.m. here in this room. And also
that's the thing, going to be in this room.
Oh, yeah, nearby, around, so right here.
Okay, I just want to say that I'm sorry for the lips were so kind of not prepared, but with the film, be sure, film is prepared.
And there will be another screening organized not by us, but by the Temesdat Foundation tomorrow
Of another film. because I
of
have
another
two
film, the
films.
film about the famous press artist, American press publishing Russian literature. And it will be, the address is 225 West 99th Street. It's a church on the corner of the West 99th and Amsterdam, so not far away from here. But for that screening, you will have to buy tickets.
But all the money will go to.
And that's a fundraiser.
project and supporting students.
In support of students, refugees from Ukraine, Belarus.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you for coming. Кино. Да. Конечно, по-русски субтитры. Да. Прекрасно. Собираемся. Спасибо, дорогая.
How to say, but it's gonna be in English as well. Just like,
So,